We'll start there. I'll do some philosophy by asking what is philosophy, which is meta as fuck, right? So, I guess, what is philosophy? Well, it's thinking about shit, right? That's what it is, thinking about shit. I said this to my uncle one time, and he said, that's what I do every morning, think about shit. And I guess he's right? We do think about shit literally and figuratively all the time. So philosophy must be something more than that. I can't just be thinking, because that's what we're all doing. So, and people ask me this, they say, well, what is philosophy, Greg? And I don't have an answer for them. I don't think anyone really has an answer to that question. It depends on what philosopher you ask. And I think generally what people mean, or at least what they follow the question up with, is what use is philosophy? What's it good for, right? And there's not really much use for it at all. So there was a really famous philosopher who was actually asked this question, a guy called Heidegger. He said, what use is philosophy? And he said, well, everyone's trying to figure out what to do with philosophy without first realizing that philosophy does something to the human being, right? It's a weird thing to say, right? What does philosophy do to the human being? It sounds like a fucking creepy uncle or something. Right? So what does he mean? I'll try to unpack that for a bit and see if we get anywhere, right? So on the one hand, it's kind of a critique of contemporary society, right? We're always trying to figure out what uses are things, right? What's this good for? What can I use this to help me be a better capitalist or whatever? What are you trying to do, right? Be self-actualize yourselves to, destroy the planet. And actually, Aristotle, another ancient Greek philosopher, pointed this out, that the best things that we do are things that are good in and of themselves. They're just good for their own purpose, right? So the best things in life aren't because they're good for anything but themselves, right? So, I guess it's a theory of human action, right? Why do we do things? Why do we get up in the morning and say brush our teeth, right? Why do we bother to do that? Well, we must be doing it because we're aiming towards some kind of good, right? There must be some kind of good we're trying to realize. Like, I brush my teeth because I want to have fresh breath, right? Because I want to be healthy, right? And when we think of human action this way, it kind of creates a sort of pyramid where eventually we end up at some good, which is just good in and of itself, right? So why am I here, for example, making a fool of myself in public? And probably because I value philosophy, I value education. Well, why do I value that? Well, I just do, right? I just think it's a good thing. It's just a good thing in and of itself. There's no further reason for it. And there's loads of examples of this, like, why do we listen to music? Well, some people listen to music because they want to be cool or whatever, but a lot of people listen to music because they value music, right? It's just good in and of itself. It's not useful for anything but its own thing, right? So human action is always aimed at some good, right? So back to Heidegger. What good is philosophy? What does it do to us, right? So on the one hand, there's a critique of contemporary society happening here, right? On the other hand, some things are self-fulfilling good. Some things are just good in and of itself, and Heidegger thinks that philosophy is one of those things, right? But there's kind of a third thing happening here that I need to... right? What does philosophy do to us, right? We haven't really approached that yet, right? And, I guess he's sort of saying something like, philosophy places the human being into question, right? So that's a weird thing to say, and philosophers do say weird things sometimes. And if we're not just complete charlatans, there has to be some justification for it. We have to know what it means, right? So I'll try to make sense of what that means, right? Philosophy places the human being into question, right? So we might approach it this way, right? We walk around every day and we have some understanding of a whole bunch of stuff that when we're really pressed on it, we don't really know what we mean, right? So, for example, I ask you, what is justice, right? You might say, well, justice is... Well, the housing crisis in Dublin is not just, right? Fair enough, right? That's true. The housing crisis is not just, but what is justice? What does justice mean? Well, I don't know. It's not just whatever, blah, blah, blah. I had some other examples, but I can't remember them now. Reparations for the African American community in America is just, right? That's fine, that's true, but what does justice itself mean, right? And we actually can't answer those kind of questions generally. We don't really know what we actually mean when we say things, right? We talk about things all the time, but we don't really know what we mean when we... Likewise, when we talk about beauty, we talk about a beautiful person, right? that person's beautiful. Or we talk about a work of art is beautiful, but the person is not a work of art unless we mean it kind of by analogy. You could say you're a work of art if you're trying to impress somebody, right? But we don't really mean you're actually a work of art. We just mean that it's like when I see you, I experience beauty in the same way that I experience a work of art. But what is beauty, right? What is the thing that connects these two very different things, right? Okay, so philosophy is the kind of thing that clarifies what we mean when we say things, right? We talk about things all the time, but we don't actually know what we're talking about. We're wrong most of the time, only because we don't know what we mean, right? So, right, yeah, I have this card covered. Number 8. Sorry. This is awkward. All right. So philosophy articulates the implicit meanings that we have, which allows us to reevaluate what we mean. When we clarify what justice means, then we can say, is it true or is it false? Does it mean something or not? Do we know what we're talking about, right? So by making our implicit understanding of things explicit, then we can evaluate whether it's true or false. And that's changes the way we see the world, fundamentally, because all of a sudden we walk around with a greater sense about what we mean when we say things like beauty or justice or truth, I mean, more fundamentally, right? So it changes our perspective on the world, fundamentally. All right. Man, I wish I had a better system going on here. So, okay, what I just talked about is basically what we call the relationship between universals and particulars, right? So I can make this even more concrete. You're sitting on a chair, as are you, and you guys are sitting on a chair, and you guys back there are sitting on chairs, right? It's great, but what's a chair, right? What is it that makes that chair and that chair and that chair the same thing, right? They're very different looking, right? We could have whole different chairs. We could have, a big sex chair with dildos coming out. I don't know, we could have loads of, but they would all be chairs, right? They would still be chairs, right? So what is it that connects the difference between particular chairs and chairness, right? The essence of what a chair is, right? It's, and it's a big problem. I mean, you could read the history of philosophy as an attempt to reconcile this problem, right? I mean, you could read the history of philosophy many ways. Like, if you were Foucault, you would say it's the history of power relations, or if, Marx, it's the history of the alienation of the worker from its labor, or whatever. Or if you ask me, it's the history of, fucking social outcasts trying to justify their existence, I guess. But, whatever. The philosopher Plato, which I spoke about earlier, was fascinated by this problem. What is the relationship between particulars and universals, right? And he said that this suggests, or this tells us, that there must be two worlds out there. There must be this world, this particular world that I'm in, where things change and they fall apart. If I destroyed that chair, chairs would still exist. If I destroyed all chairs, I could still make another chair, which suggests that there must be some kind of eternal truth to things that is beyond this world. This is what he called the world of the forms, or the ideas, right? So there is some eternal world out there that somehow we know, but it's not in this world, so where is it? It must be a different world, right? Okay, so this creates a big problem, right? How do we get from the particular world to the universal world? How do we move up from this world into the eternal truth of things? And Plato's answer is kind of beautiful. He says it's love, right? It's love, that desire. It brings us up into the truth, the eternal truth of things. I don't think Plato's right about everything. I don't agree with this two-world split, but I think that's a beautiful idea. Actually, the word that he uses, the ancient Greek word, they have a number of words for love. The word he uses is eros, right? Eros is a different kind of love than other loves. It's kind of a sensual or sexual love even, which I implicitly really like, because it suggests that philosophers are kind of horny for reality. Right? It's just like, tell me what you are, right? And it means that philosophy is philosophy is this kind of love letter that we write to reality, right? We try to seduce reality into revealing itself to us, right? Which I think is a nice idea, actually. And it connects with the fundamental word, the word of philosophy, right? The word philosophy in Greek splits up as philosophia, which means the love, different kind of love than eros, actually, more like a companionship love, or a sort of friendship that we have with Sophia, which means wisdom, right? So philosophers are the friends of wisdom. Now this is really important because it does not say that philosophers are wise. A lot of philosophers have forgotten about this. We think that we're geniuses, right? But we're not actually. We're sort of, we admire wisdom, we are friends of wisdom, but we never claim to have it, right? We can't have it, we seek it, but we know that we don't know, right? That's the fundamental lesson of philosophy. We don't know what we're talking about. In fact, Plato says this. He says, the gods know that human wisdom is worthless, right? And this was the big lesson in ancient Greek through Plato's philosophy, through his teacher, Socrates. He thought on the ignorance, right? And I think that allows us, that when we realize that, and we realize that just studying philosophy, you're just constantly reading these geniuses who, know things far more than you do, and you just constantly, you're thrown back on your own ignorance. You don't know what you're talking about. And it allows us to appreciate life, the kind of wonder of life, and our own kind of limitations, right? So back to Heidegger. Right? Everything goes back to fucking Heidegger. He's a Nazi, by the way. So bad. Anyway, genius, but a Nazi. It's a really big problem. That's my thesis was on, actually. He's critiquing the guy for being a filthy Nazi. But he's great, So back to Heidegger, right? Philosophy teaches us that we don't really know what we're talking about, right? And to somehow be secure in this place where we don't know, to be at home in not really being at home in the world. And that's placing us into question. That's what philosophy does. It places us into question. And that's what Heidegger means, I think, by that kind of odd statement. So, that's it.
Oh.
Thanks so much. Hey, this is maybe a bit cheeky, but this is a sort of trial run for a thing that I want to do. I think philosophy is really important, actually. I think at a time when, everyone thinks they know everything and the world is falling apart, I think any little tiny bit of philosophy could be really helpful to everyone. I don't think that it should stay in universities. I think it should come out and do it in this kind of environment. And I sort of want to, maybe do something like this again, and maybe have official nights where not only philosophers but poets and comedians even come out and talk about themes and that kind of thing. So that's something I'm experimenting with at the moment. But I haven't done anything with it, and so I need to force myself to maybe try do something. So if I was to pass around a little sheet, and if anyone was interested in more sort of stand-up philosophy-like events, they could put their email on this sheet, and then I could email them when I get my shit together and organize something. So thank you so much. I'll pass it out.